The quietness of the bunk room wrapped around her like a blanket, a rare gift in a place where silence was never permanent. The gentle hum of the ship's engines beneath her had become a lullaby, a steady reminder that for now, everything was in order. She was resting, eyes closed but not deeply asleep, letting her body relax after hours of drills and duties. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that the sea outside was as calm as the steady rhythm she felt beneath her feet, that the world beyond the steel walls of the vessel was not capable of changing in an instant. The air smelled faintly of salt carried in by the ventilation system, mixed with the metallic tang that seemed to cling to every corner of the ship. She exhaled slowly, savoring the illusion of peace, the rare sense of stillness in a life marked by unpredictability. But the stillness was never permanent, and she knew that. The Navy had taught her that comfort was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the reality of service. It was then, through the quiet, that she heard the Admiral's voice. It wasn't shouted, but it carried a weight that pressed through the walls and seemed to pierce her rest. The announcement began with a calm authority, but there was no mistaking the urgency beneath it. His words echoed through the corridors, commanding immediate attention. A storm was ahead. The moment the phrase reached her, the illusion of safety was gone. Her eyes snapped open, and her body tensed with the instinctive readiness that years of discipline had carved into her. The Admiral's announcement was more than a warning. It was a summons. It wasn't just about waves or rain. It was about the unknown that comes with nature's wrath, the test that no human could truly predict or control. She pushed herself up from her bunk, her heart already beating faster, not from panic but from a sharpened awareness. Her mind began to calculate what this meant. The storm could mean dangerous shifts in the ship's stability, the risk of damage to equipment, or even worse, the threat of lives being put at risk if they weren't prepared. On a ship, storms were not just weather, they were adversaries, forces to be met with strategy, endurance, and unity. She remembered the countless times instructors had spoken of storms during training, painting pictures of waves taller than towers and winds that could rip steel from its bolts. Some had told these stories as warnings, others as lessons of survival, but all carried the same message. The ocean never bowed to anyone. Rising from her bunk, she could already feel the hum of the ship shift, as though the vessel itself was bracing for what was to come. She tied back her hair, slid into her boots, and straightened her posture, each movement a ritual of readiness. The Admiral's voice still rang in her mind, steady and commanding, demanding that no one forget what was at stake. The calm she had felt moments ago now seemed like a deception, a mask the ocean wore before revealing its true face. She had always respected the sea, its beauty and its violence, its ability to cradle a ship gently one day and try to tear it apart the next. The Admiral's announcement was a reminder that respect was not enough. It was vigilance that mattered. She thought of the others still stirring from their bunks, some startled, some steady, all processing the gravity of the moment in their own way. Each one of them knew the meaning of such an announcement. It was not a suggestion to prepare. It was an order to be ready for battle. Only this time the enemy was not flesh and blood but wind and water. The air in the bunk room seemed heavier now, filled with the weight of expectation. She could hear footsteps in the corridor outside, hurried but purposeful, the rhythm of sailors answering the Admiral's call. She joined them, her own steps matching their urgency. As she moved, she couldn't help but think of how quickly life on the sea shifted from mundane to monumental. One moment you were resting in your bunk, lulled into thinking that the world outside was calm, and the next you were standing on the edge of chaos, staring into the face of a storm that promised to test every ounce of training, discipline, and willpower you had within you. The shift from routine to crisis came with such suddenness that it left no room for hesitation. Life aboard the vessel followed a rhythm, a structure built on discipline and the comfort of repetition. Each day was measured by drills, duties, meals, and the precious hours of rest in between. That routine was not just a schedule. It was a shield against chaos, a way to preserve focus and order even in the middle of an unforgiving sea. She had come to rely on it, the steady hum of predictability that made the vastness of the ocean less overwhelming. Yet, when the Admiral's voice broke through the intercom with the announcement of the storm, All that structure seemed to dissolve in an instant. What was once ordinary, resting in bunks, checking equipment, preparing for the next watch, was suddenly replaced by urgency, uncertainty, and the knowledge that survival now depended on their ability to respond. The transition was not gradual. It wasn't as if the ship had been slowly preparing for danger. One moment, the crew had been resting, laughing quietly, or carrying out small tasks with routine precision. The next, they were propelled into a reality where every action carried weight. The Admiral's words were like a switch thrown in the collective mind of the ship, igniting an awareness that could not be ignored. The sound of his voice echoed with the authority of command, but also with something else, experience. He didn't speak like a man predicting bad weather. He spoke like someone who had seen storms break ships apart and take lives with them. That tone alone was enough to make the crew understand the seriousness of what was ahead. For her, the change was visceral. Just moments before, her body had been still, at ease, embracing the temporary reprieve of rest. But the Admiral's announcement lit up her nerves as if a current had passed through her. The shift from relaxation to readiness was immediate, like muscle memory, a product of years of conditioning. She had been taught to respond without hesitation, to allow instinct to take over when the situation demanded. Still, the abruptness of the change was jarring. It reminded her of how fragile the boundary between calm and chaos truly was. Around her, the signs of transformation unfolded quickly. Sailors who had been lying in bunks were now on their feet, pulling on boots, securing belts, their expressions sharp with focus. The chatter of casual conversation was gone, replaced by clipped instructions and the sound of movement. The narrow corridors filled with the rhythm of hurried footsteps, the echo of equipment being lifted and secured. Even the air seemed different, charged with tension, as though the entire ship had taken a collective breath and was holding it. The routine that had been second nature only minutes before was gone, stripped away by the reality of crisis. What struck her most was how quickly the mind recalibrated. She no longer thought about the small comforts of her bunk or the monotony of drills. Her focus shifted entirely to preparation, to what the storm might demand of her and the crew. She thought of the equipment checks that would need to be doubled, the tasks that suddenly carried greater consequences, the lives that depended on every action being executed with precision. This was the truth of the sea. It gave no warning, no mercy, and no time to ease into its challenges. The Admiral's announcement carried not just urgency but clarity. He had chosen his words carefully, and though they were few, they carried weight enough to ripple through every corner of the ship. He didn't need to explain the magnitude of the storm or the risks they faced. His tone alone told them everything they needed to know. It was the kind of voice that cut through doubt, that replaced uncertainty with action. In moments like this, leadership was not about explanation, it was about transformation, taking an entire crew from routine to crisis readiness in the span of a single command. She felt her body moving before her mind could fully process. Boots laced, uniform straightened, she joined the others filing into the narrow passageways. The hum of the ship's engines still ran beneath her feet, but it no longer felt like the gentle rhythm of routine. Now it sounded like a drumbeat, an urgent call to action. The storm ahead had not yet touched them, but its presence was already reshaping everything within. The familiar environment of the ship, once defined by order and predictability, now felt alive with tension, every steel surface echoing the weight of what was to come. It was in this moment that she realized how thin the line truly was between calm and crisis. One announcement, one shift in the Admiral's tone, and everything changed. The ordinary had been stripped away, leaving only the raw urgency of survival. This was the life they had chosen, the reality of serving at sea, where routine could vanish in an instant, and every sailor was expected to transform from rest to readiness without hesitation. The storm itself was not just a force of nature, but a presence that pressed down on everyone aboard the vessel, a reminder of how small human beings were in the face of the ocean's power. Long before the first wave crashed against the hull, its approach was felt in the subtle shifts, the tightening wind, the distant rumble of thunder, the unnatural stillness of the sea before it began to churn. She could sense it even as she stood among her fellow sailors, the atmosphere thick with an energy that made every breath feel heavier. The Admiral's announcement had prepared them mentally, but now the reality was tangible, a living force that surrounded them on all sides. It was not simply about weathering a storm. It was about enduring something that tested both body and spirit, demanding resilience beyond what most would ever know. As the first sheets of rain pounded the deck and the ship began to lurch under the weight of the waves, she felt her balance tested with every step. Muscles tightened, hands gripped rails, eyes stayed sharp, because a single misstep could be dangerous. The sound was overwhelming. Howling winds, groaning steel, water slamming like fists against the vessel's sides. Yet within that chaos she found focus. Training had prepared her for moments like these, when external conditions sought to tear away concentration and willpower. The storm demanded complete presence, stripping away distractions, leaving only the raw determination to survive. What struck her most was the way the crew responded as one organism. Each sailor carried out their role with precision, their movements honed by countless drills. But this time it was not practice. Every action mattered. She saw hands working quickly to secure lines, voices shouting instructions that were nearly swallowed by the roar of the wind, eyes scanning every detail of the ship to ensure nothing was overlooked. This was resilience in its purest form, not just enduring hardship but actively pushing back against it, refusing to be overwhelmed. The storm raged, but the crew did not yield. Inside her chest, fear and strength wrestled with one another. There was no denying the danger, no pretending that the sea was anything less than merciless. Yet fear did not control her. Instead, it sharpened her focus, reminding her of what was at stake. She thought of the Admiral's voice, steady and commanding, a lifeline in the storm. Leadership in such moments was not about grand speeches but about presence, about giving people the strength to believe they could face what lay ahead. The Admiral's calm resolve had set the tone, and now every sailor drew from it. Resilience was not born in isolation. It was a force passed from one to another, magnified by shared purpose. Her mind flickered back to moments before the storm, when rest seemed enough, when the greatest challenge had been monotony. That contrast now fueled her determination. The sea did not care if they were tired, unprepared, or overwhelmed. It demanded everything, and in return it offered nothing but the chance to endure. She realized then that resilience was not a single act of defiance but a series of choices made in succession, choosing to stand when it was easier to collapse, choosing to focus when distraction beckoned, choosing to believe in survival when doubt whispered otherwise. The physical toll grew heavier as the hours stretched on. Salt water stung her eyes, her arms ached from gripping ropes, her body swayed and strained against the ship's constant heaving. Yet with every moment, she discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known were there. Resilience was not about avoiding pain or difficulty. It was about discovering the depth of one's capacity when pushed to the edge. The storm was relentless, but so was she. With each wave that crashed against the vessel, she braced herself and found that she could endure just a little more. Around her, the crew's unity deepened that resilience. There was no room for selfishness, no space for hesitation. Every action supported another, every effort tied to the survival of all. She saw sailors exchanging quick nods of encouragement, lending hands when another faltered, stepping in without hesitation where help was needed. This was what kept them strong, the knowledge that they did not face the storm alone. In that unity, fear lost its edge, replaced by the steady rhythm of shared resilience. The storm's power was immense, its fury unrelenting, but what endured in the face of it was greater still. Human resilience was not louder than the thunder or stronger than the waves, but it was persistent, unyielding, and defiant. It did not need to conquer the storm. It only needed to withstand it, to last long enough to see its fury pass. And in that struggle, she discovered not just the strength of her body, but the resilience of her spirit, a force that could stand firm even when the sea itself seemed determined to break them. When the Admiral spoke of the storm ahead, his tone was not just a warning but a call for unity, a reminder that no one person could endure such a trial alone. She felt the shift immediately, the way every sailor straightened, the way unspoken bonds of trust tightened in an instant. The sea was unforgiving, and the storm would test not just their skill but their ability to act as one body, one mind, one will. Unity was no longer an abstract concept. It became the only lifeline they had, a thread woven through each individual, binding them into something stronger than any single soul could be. As the wind began to scream and the first waves struck hard against the hull, she noticed how naturally the crew fell into rhythm. Each sailor knew their place, their task, and how it fed into the greater whole. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. One man secured ropes, another reinforced hatches, while others coordinated supplies below deck. She moved with them, her actions blending seamlessly into the flow, her body remembering drills, but her mind realizing the weight of this reality. This wasn't practice anymore. Unity wasn't something spoken. It was lived, felt, carried in every movement. The noise was overwhelming. Metal groaning, water crashing, orders shouted against the roar of the storm. But beneath it was a harmony, a hidden music of survival. Each sailor's efforts complemented another's, filling gaps, compensating for weaknesses. She saw one struggling with a rope, hands slipping, and immediately another stepped in to steady him, their grip locking together until the task was complete. No thanks were needed, no words exchanged, only the understanding that they were bound together, that one person's fall would endanger them all. Unity was not optional, it was survival. She thought of the Admiral in that moment, standing unflinching, his presence like a pillar in the storm. But even he was not an island. His strength depended on theirs, just as theirs depended on his. Leadership and crew were not divided. They were two parts of the same whole. The Admiral gave direction, but it was their unity that carried it out, transforming words into action, vision into endurance. She realized then that unity did not erase individuality. It elevated it, channeling each sailor's unique strength into something far greater. The storm grew fiercer, waves hammering harder, wind ripping through the night like a beast determined to tear them apart. She felt exhaustion pulling at her body, salt water burning her eyes. Yet when she looked around and saw her comrades, she found strength renewed. They were tired too, drenched and weary, but none of them faltered. When one stumbled, another pulled them upright. When one faltered in focus, another steadied their resolve with a sharp reminder or even just a glance. The bonds between them were not forged in comfort but in struggle. And in this moment, unity was the fire that kept them alive. Below deck, the same spirit thrived. She saw sailors tending to equipment, sharing what little dry space remained, even sparing encouraging words to one another. Small acts carried great weight. A nod, a brief smile, the handing over of a tool just when it was needed. Every gesture was proof of a bond that transcended rank or background. The storm had no care for status, but in their unity, they found equality. Every soul was essential, every effort woven into the survival of the group. Her own spirit swelled with pride in being part of something so vast yet intimate. She thought about how, before the storm, individuals could pass each other with little notice, caught in their own routines. Now there was no separation. They breathed together, strained together, resisted together. The ship itself seemed to echo with that unity, creaking but holding, as though it too drew strength from the sailors aboard it. Unity was not without sacrifice. Each sailor gave up comfort, privacy, and even their own fears to become part of something larger. She saw men and women push themselves beyond limits not for glory but for each other. That sacrifice was the heartbeat of their unity, the reason they could endure when the sea demanded everything. It was not just about holding the ship together, but about holding one another together. And in that endless night, battered by wind and rain, she understood that unity was more than survival. It was a kind of defiance, a declaration that no matter how vast the ocean, no matter how fierce the storm, they would not be scattered, they would not be broken. They were one, and in their togetherness, they carried a strength that no storm could ever truly claim. The storm was not just outside. It lived in the hearts of everyone aboard, testing their courage in ways few could ever imagine. Fear was a natural response, and she felt it too, the cold fingers of uncertainty crawling up her spine as each wave threatened to tear the ship apart. Yet what separated them from surrender was the ability to confront fear head-on, to let it sharpen their senses instead of paralyze them. Courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it, and every sailor on deck was forced to make that choice with every passing second. She felt her own body tremble under the weight of the storm, but deep within, something steadier refused to break. The Admiral's voice echoed through the chaos, cutting through wind and rain like steel. His words were not grand speeches but sharp commands, rooted in discipline and certainty. Still, she could feel the undercurrent of his resolve, and that gave her something to cling to. Courage often began with someone daring enough to show it first, and his presence inspired others to dig deep and summon their own. Even as fear clawed at her chest, she steadied her breathing, tightened her grip, and forced herself to move with purpose. That small choice became the first stone laid in the path of courage. As the storm worsened, courage revealed itself in countless small acts that might have gone unnoticed in calmer times. A sailor tied down a loose barrel while waves threatened to drag him overboard. Another climbed the mast despite lightning cracking across the sky, his silhouette framed against flashes of light as he worked with unshakable determination. She herself pulled a wounded comrade to safety, ignoring the ache in her arms and the fear that whispered she might fail. These acts were not about glory or recognition. They were about survival, about protecting one another, about refusing to let fear dictate the outcome. Inside, she could feel the storm trying to invade her mind, whispering doubts, magnifying every risk, every what-if. Courage demanded silence against those voices, demanded a clarity that came only from focusing on the task at hand. She realized then that courage was not loud, not always heroic in the way stories told it. It was often quiet, hidden in the refusal to quit, the determination to take one more step, to hold one more line, to believe that endurance was possible even when it seemed impossible. She remembered the training that had drilled resilience into her, the endless hours of pushing her body and mind to the breaking point. Yet no training could fully prepare anyone for the raw terror of nature's fury. It was here, in the real storm, where true courage was revealed, not in the classroom, not in the safety of controlled exercises. Every sailor on board was living proof of that truth, rising beyond fear because they had no other choice but to fight or be swallowed whole. The storm howled on, waves smashing against the hull with violent force, the ship shuddering with every impact. Fear tried again to creep in, telling her the ocean was too vast, too merciless. But she looked to her comrades, to the faces grim with determination, to the Admiral's unwavering stance, and she found her resolve mirrored back at her. Their courage fed her own, and her courage fed theirs, a cycle of strength that became a lifeline. Even in the darkest hours, when exhaustion pressed like a weight and the horizon disappeared into blackness, she saw courage glowing in the smallest gestures. A sailor sharing a canteen of water with trembling hands. Another offering a few words of encouragement when silence might have been easier. The way they leaned on each other, not ashamed of their fear but refusing to be defined by it, showed her that courage was not only individual but collective. She began to understand that courage was not just about surviving the storm, it was about transformation. Each moment spent resisting fear reshaped her, stripped away the illusion of weakness, and revealed a core of strength she might never have discovered otherwise. Fear remained, always lingering, always pressing, but courage turned it into fuel, into the very fire that kept her moving. As lightning tore across the sky once more, illuminating the deck in stark flashes, she saw herself reflected in the eyes of her comrades. They were frightened, just as she was, but their courage burned too brightly to be extinguished. And in that fire, she knew that even the wildest storm could not break them, not while courage lived in every soul on board. Leadership was not a title or a rank, but a weight that settled on the shoulders of those who chose to bear it when others faltered. In the midst of the storm, with chaos threatening to consume the ship and fear gnawing at every heart, leadership revealed itself in the smallest yet most profound ways. The Admiral's announcements had been steady, cutting through the roar of wind and rain, but leadership did not stop at orders shouted across the deck. It flowed through every decision, every sacrifice, every unspoken moment where someone stepped forward when silence might have been easier. She had not expected it, but leadership was already rising within her, shaping her actions, pushing her to guide others through the turmoil even as her own doubts threatened to pull her under. The storm did not care about rank, training, or past victories. It demanded raw resilience, demanded that someone be strong enough to set an example when fear might have otherwise turned into panic. She could see it in the way her comrades' eyes shifted to her, seeking assurance even when she herself was trembling inside. Leadership was not about denying fear. It was about showing that courage could exist alongside it, that determination could still drive action even when uncertainty loomed. Each time she met their eyes and nodded firmly, she gave them a fragment of steadiness to hold on to, and in turn, their renewed resolve fed back into her own. The Admiral's presence had been the anchor, but the storm was vast, and leadership had to multiply. She found herself shouting instructions to sailors who were losing their grip, guiding them toward ropes or helping them secure loose equipment. Her voice cracked at times, her throat raw from the salt and strain, yet the urgency gave her words weight. Leadership demanded clarity, demanded that she put aside hesitation and replace it with conviction, because hesitation could mean disaster. With every decision made quickly, with every call that pulled someone back from the brink of danger, she grew into the role she had not been seeking but could no longer avoid. There were moments when doubt threatened to consume her, whispering that she was not ready, not strong enough to lead others in a storm like this. But leadership was not about perfection, it was about responsibility. She remembered the wounded sailor she had helped earlier, his strength faltering until she had pulled him back to safety. That moment replayed in her mind as a reminder. Leadership meant shouldering the burden not just for yourself but for those who could not carry it alone. It was about choosing to act, even when the weight seemed unbearable. Every storm tests the limits of human endurance, but it also reveals the hidden leaders among the crew. She began to see it in others as well. The young sailor who refused to abandon his post, the exhausted woman who still found the strength to encourage those around her, the admiral who remained unshaken despite the chaos pressing in from all sides. Leadership was contagious, spreading like fire in the dark, igniting sparks of determination wherever it touched. She realized she was now part of that flame, and with it came the responsibility to keep it burning. The storm howled relentlessly, but leadership meant refusing to be drowned out by its fury. It meant keeping focus sharp when distraction could prove fatal, ensuring that those around her knew they were not alone. She found herself watching the faces of her comrades, reading their fear, their exhaustion, and offering the silent reassurance that they had the strength to endure. Leadership lived in her actions more than her words. The steady hand offered to help someone to their feet, the firm grip on a rope that kept another from being swept away, the moments when she chose to step forward when every instinct begged her to step back. What surprised her most was how leadership demanded vulnerability as much as strength. It was not about pretending to be invincible but about showing honesty, admitting when fear existed while refusing to let it take command. Her comrades respected that truth, drawing strength from knowing they were not alone in their struggles. It forged a bond that was unbreakable, a unity that could withstand even the storm's unrelenting force. As the night pressed on and exhaustion weighed heavily on every limb, leadership became less about bold declarations and more about endurance. It was about being present, about holding the line, about continuing to stand when others looked ready to collapse. She understood now that leadership was not granted in calm seas but earned in storms, carved out of hardship, proven in moments where everything threatened to fall apart. The Admiral had sparked it, but it was spreading through them all, and she found herself at its heart, carrying the weight with steady resolve. Leadership, she realized, was not a single act but a chain of choices, a series of moments where responsibility outweighed fear. It was the quiet decision to keep moving, to keep guiding, to keep believing that survival was possible when the storm insisted otherwise. And as she stood among her comrades, drenched, weary, and battered by the relentless waves, she felt the weight of that truth settle firmly within her, shaping her into something stronger than she had ever imagined.